I am Niveditha.indrajit and I am in conversation with Pallavi Reddy, Aka Soni.
Hi Nivedita. It feels very odd calling you Nivedita.
Yeah, that's because we are cousins.
Yes.
And that's because you're my little sister. But I really admire you for who you are and who you've become as a person. I mean, rest of it is also there. Like you chose a path which nobody else has chosen from our family, at least. Yeah, you have a percentage in what's his name? That uncle. He was also into films. Madhav Pennana, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know how he faced with the camera and all, but yeah, for us in our generation, yeah, you're the.
No, actually, incidentally, if we look into the family, there will always be connections to someone in the film industry. Like everyone knows a doctor, everyone knows some distant relative in the film industry. But yeah, nonetheless, I don't know of anyone in our immediate family circle. It's always been predominantly like doctors and engineers and a whole load of lawyers and civil servants.
So you actually wanted to go into films from the beginning, or it is just it's something that you did?
No, actually, I mean, see, like growing up, there was a huge interest, in fact, in art and in film, like watching films. But no, there was of course no one in that field, and then predominantly also came from a background where it was typical South Indian family where there's so much focus on academic. So it wasn't something where like a Spielberg was like shooting films at 8 years old or something. No, I wasn't doing anything of that sort. But fairly early on, I think somewhere around my 11th grade, 10th, 11th grade, there was a huge interest in photography. So I was definitely not inclined towards any of the mainstream career options. There was an inclination towards photography, specifically towards photojournalism. I was very interested in that, and but actually I did not pursue it. So yeah, I took a very convoluted route coming around to where I did. So I think that was the germ of where the interest began. I was doing kind of like photography as an amateur, not seriously, but that's kind of like how it all got started.
You also did a stint in advertising and then went to film school, right?
Yes, so like I said, it was quite a convoluted route. Primarily, it was like, when I made this announcement that I wanted to do anything with the world of journalism, and that was like photojournalism really was unimaginable, because really for people at home to fathom, like, what is this? Like, do people actually earn a living with this? Like, this is supposed to be those really crazy, backed out people who kind of just take it up. They don't really have stable careers and they do random stuff. So it wasn't a career option. So naturally, like I mean, after quite a bit of a tussle at home, eventually I kind of I struck a deal. So I struck a deal with my parents where it was like, okay, fine, I was good at academics. I'm going to do engineering. And then after that, the deal was like, you go ahead and like take maybe a couple of years, 2-3 years, see if you can do something else in your photography thing, or whatever you want to do, and then we'll see what happens. So right after, I think not even after, the second semester of my engineering itself, through a family friend, there was a contact. I happened to intern at a local advertising agency in Hyderabad called Chikal Advertising. And that's when I got started. So, and then, it was kind of like I started in kind of like the art department. I mean, it was a fairly local agency, so they didn't really have a photography department. They used to outsource work to photographers. But that's kind of where the whole thing began. So that was a stint in advertising, and advertising actually was the one where that led me to film. That's why it was kind of like a convoluted route, because from Vital I moved on to a national agency in Bangalore called Marvel, which did have like a film and photography department. And at Marvel was when, like, I mean, since I was handling, like, part of the department that was handling both things, I got to go on to film shoot, like, actual film shoot. And I think pretty much the very first time I was on set, I was just absolutely enamored. And I still remember, like, I mean, it was like a child in Wonderland, because I hadn't really seen this world, like, behind the scenes. See, you're interested in it, but how do you make it? But also, like, there was just something that resonated within me, and I was like, this is where I belong. I mean, it was just that. It was like, this is what I want to do. This is where I belong, And it was very specifically about, like, I remember, so there was like a camera, it was a shoot with a film camera, not a digital camera. And they were like setting up lights and all of that. And I just saw this whole thing and I was like, this is what I would like to do. So, as you say, sometimes a bell goes off in your head. I think that's kind of like what happened. And then, of course, like, I mean, I can logicize it in hindsight about like telling stories and all of it. But I think the first thing I would want to talk about is like, yeah, there's a very visceral gut kind of feelings that took me on to the path of filmmaking.
It is my observation about you that as a child you grew up where your mom was working and you would go to the hospital and you would observe the nurses and stuff and all. I think there is a very sensible sensitivity about you, that you are so thoughtful about things which normally people are not aware of. Like, there is a certain way you do things. Does that have any impact in the way you shoot, the way you live, the way you perceive things?
Wow, that's that's quite a nice thing for you to say. Thank you. It totally does. So when you talk of cinema, I mean, I do documentary, narrative, shorts, all kinds. So whether you're doing fiction, whether you're doing documentary, I mean, the whole thing about cinema really is about, the most beautiful thing is observing life and being able to actually like recreate life in fiction. Whereas in documentary, you just like step back and you capture. So I think one of the biggest qualities any filmmaker, in fact, writer, even an editor, has to have is the observation skills and a great deal of empathy towards people, and to be able to like see them as non-judgmentally as possible and observe life, because that's what we're doing. You observe life, and only when you observe life can you capture life. So even like little nuances of characters, like of how people move about, how they smile, how they talk, their body language, all of that is what really adds layers to character. And like, yeah, I mean, that's again a big deal of what even actors do. So you observe life, and then, like everyone says, you steal from life. So yes, it does help.
So, like, how much does, like, we know that a film is made, like, if you're looking at a feature film, we know that there is a director and then, there is a certain angle and all that. Do cinematographers also get to say from which angle they shoot, or I don't know, like when you say you're a person who observes a lot, let's say there's a particular scene which requires something and you're able to see it, and probably the director says it or not. So how do you work in such a scenario? How do you bring that?
So definitely, I mean, a cinematographer does bring that to a people. In fact, a lot of decisions, I mean, not just on set, but even beforehand. So once you have like a draft of the script, there are many sessions that you sit down with the director to talk about director, even at times like the writer, to get a better sense of the world, to understand the world of the story. So after that, it is in fact the job of the director and the DP, the cinematographer or the director, to be able to translate the script into visuals, the visual medium. So that's when we break it down into shots and short divisions for every scene. And those go through several iterations. I mean, from the prep to actually what happens on set when actors move about again, things can change. So you're there through that entire process. I mean, a lot of times, cinematographer is definitely serving the vision of the director. So you try and understand how the director sees the film, and then you try to like come up with shots which are, you have to talk the same language. You're not kind of like going into different directions. So that's kind of how it works. So actually, yes, you are like, I mean, it's literally like you and the director are kind of like taking the same steps on set in coming up with things. So usually, like in brief, what happens on set is noise in the background. So what usually happens on set is like if whatever is the scene that we are shooting for the day, what we do is usually like the actors come in, just they're not in costume or anything, we call it blocking. We just go through the motions of, okay, like for instance, character enters the room, there's another character who's sitting down, they're having a conversation. So we see the motions of that. We already have a plan in mind, but then we see kind of like what the actors want to do. There are also rehearsals and workshops that happen beforehand. So all of that comes in. And then we decide on the shots, wide shot, close up, medium shot. So that whole conversation happens between the director and the DP. And once you decide whatever happens, whatever the shot that's going to come up, then the director goes on to maybe have his or her conversation with the actors and the rest of his crew, and the DP sets up the camera comes in, and then what lens to come on the camera. How do we light the character? How do we light the scene? So like you go off to do your own individual thing. So yeah, I mean, I'll just segue a little bit here, but it's kind of like, so this is a very interesting thing about usually like, when you think of cinema, of film, I mean, the face of a film is usually the actor because those are the people we see. And then probably the most known person after them would be the director or like, to some extent, producers if they're very well known. But actually, the most beautiful thing about cinema is that it's like we say, there's no such thing as a one-man band. It's a collaborative art form. It's just that, that's what it is. It's not like a painter is sitting on a canvas and thinks of something and decides everything. There are so many people like behind the scenes. There's a production designer, there is a DP, there's a sound recordist. Like production designer comes in with their own like inputs about the color of the scene and like textures and how do you create stuff. DPs talk about shots and then you talk about like lighting. And then it goes on to editing. I mean, the editor brings in their own sensibility. And then the director is like working through with along with all of these people. And then, creating this form together. So it's quite an interesting thing that I get this question a lot. It's like, yeah, I know, I mean, does the director decide this or do you decide this? And it's really collaborative. So you have to have like an absolutely beautiful, it's called a marriage. It's called like on set, it's like a DP director's marriage. Once it goes into post-production, it's the director editor. It's like a marriage. You just have to have that harmony. You have to have that balance and to be able to waltz it. And that's how it gets.
So, although most people at the releases or something, it says we work like a family. It really is working in integration with ideas as to how the flow happens, right? Like when you're saying, yeah.
Different people's ideas, like in fact, I would say any of like major film directors, when you talk to them about it, they always acknowledge the contribution of their crew, and it's not just like the crew, the heads of departments. Sometimes ideas can come from like even an assistant. Like there have been times that we very beautiful anecdotes about like a still photographer, like a still photographer is shooting the stills of the actors and production stills. And they come up with an angle which is very interesting. I mean, this actually happened with a friend of mine at film school when he was working as a still photographer, and he was working with this like really big award-winning director. And he had some really nice angle, and the director like saw it and he said, okay, let's set up this angle. So actually, if you're open, to suggestions, if you don't have an ego, you're really willing to like collaborate. I mean, like even a DP might get like a great suggestion from a camera assistant, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So ideas can actually come from anywhere. You have all of these creative people, you have minds on sets that you can actually like tap into when you're creating. So yeah.
So I have been interested in films as a child. Like I would watch Assamese films, Chinese films, Japanese films. Like whenever we would go to Tirupati, where grandfather and Pedama and all are there was a TV at that time. We didn't have a TV at home. Or if we would all go for films. I would just watch from this corner to this corner and this corner to this corner. It's like for me, it's not just what's going on between, it's the entire thing. What I observed is like there is a different texture when a Mani Ratnam does it. There's a different texture when an Anubhav Sinha does it. Or there's a different texture, like the film itself. So it's like there is a team that works, this particular team has these colors. And, for me, it was an observation. So now when you're saying that, there is everything going on, there is a collaboration about everything. How does uh, that colors, like you see cigarette ads, they're very dreary, in films there are like brightened up. When there's a dark scene, suddenly there's rain and stuff. What is the elements, what is the play with the elementals about? What is the play with the colors in that sense? How does music or how does the color of the scheme can bring out the emotion in a person?
It's I mean, there's a lot about. I mean, that's actually the whole quest when you're making a movie is like what you said, and I've actually seen this very often in like just like what you're telling me. A lot of people tell me when I was a child, I observed this. Like we've had many conversations. I too have had this personal experience of like I remember the Mani Ratnam films, like Santosh Sivan's like movie lighting and all of that, and the use of color. So we call, I mean, basically, essentially, we use words such as mood and tone to describe the mood of the scene, to describe, like, we say tone in the sense kind of like pitch. Think of it as music, like how music actually brings out a certain emotion with a certain pitch and a certain tone. So we use those words to say that, okay, no, it's like a certain scene has to have a kind of a mood. And what usually happens with color is there's a lot of color theory, and there are different schools of color theory too. But what usually happens is each DP and even like director has their own interpretation of color, and in fact, culturally too, we have our own interpretations. Like, I mean, for instance, very simple thing. Like let's take the color red, right? So red in India can actually mean something like auspicious in the cultural scenario. In the West, red actually could mean love. It means danger. It means things. In China, for instance, red is luck, good luck. So cinema of each culture uses color in their own, and like also a lot of things depend on what kind of like cultural background perhaps we come from. So for instance, like in India, we have a lot of color. We have a lot of bright color. That's why when you look at our movies too, there is a lot of bright color. Whereas if you look at European movies, for instance, it's like their colors are more muted. They're and also like their weather is like colder, it's more blue. So the costumes that they would wear are darker. So it varies, but what you actually do is, again, it comes down to observation, a lot of observation, a lot of like study of different cultures, and then it all depends on where your story is set. For instance, if my story is set in Kashmir, I would lend it a different color palette to represent the emotion, as opposed to like if it was set in, let's say, AP or Tamil Nadu, where you use like brighter colors to kind of like, and also like lighting would change. It's like Kashmir has like really soft, wintry, cold views, whereas down south it's kind of like the light is very harsh on the face. So you use the harsh light kind of like, especially, I mean, and you see that a lot also, like, I mean, I think Mani Ratnam films are probably like the best example from this one, like, absolutely genius.
And there is also a signature, like there's this girl dancing. For me, I think whether it is Roja or whether it is Guru, or there's this girl. There's a protagonist in the girl as well that is shown very gently, very subtly. At the same time, it's just put out there. So my question is also about signature. Does eventually does a signature come out that you operate in a certain way, or do you believe in the school of, okay, I don't stick to any particular signature style, I will evolve as per the situation, or both?
So the quest is actually to break the signature, because what happens is if you have a signature kind of like, that kind of becomes your style, your look, as we say, that, oh yeah, this movie is like known. And also to some extent it happens that we all have our individual taste, so we tend to gravitate towards, like what you said, maybe something very subtle of, how you would show things, or something maybe very in your face of how you would portray things. So but the idea really, especially like with movies, and going back to what I was saying about observing life, is like you want to be as true to the world and characters as possible. So you don't want to color it with your signature, but rather take on that world and see how best you can interpret it. So I think the best thing, I mean, a happy medium would be like, you bring in your craft, your taste, because that is what is, that is your core competency, because that is why you're there actually. Like as an artist, you're there for your sensibility. You bring your sensibility and then you take on that world and blend it. And then, and you always are like, as they say, like, I can put it as like, don't really show your brush strokes. So we always say this thing about like, it shouldn't be in your face. The audience shouldn't be like just caught up with how beautiful it is. They should be caught up in the emotion of it. They should be caught up in the flow of it. And don't try to put your signature on the screen. But like, so it's like, don't show the brush strokes. Just like blend them all in. That's kind of like, that's the quest. That's really the quest of this journey of like being a DP and being able to like portray and capture different kinds of worlds.
One beautiful thing that I've learned when I went to movies with you is like we sit through the credits. I always wanted to sit through credits, but people would like, oh, movie is over, let's go home. But you were the first person in my entire life who said, let's sit through the credits. And, we actually clapped through the entire credits. And I found that really, very nice, because, okay, there is somebody else in this whole world who does that. I'm not the only person who wants to see all the names of all the people, including, Spotlight, whatever. I mean, where it's edited, what is the team, what are the different things. So what I'd like to ask, or what I'd like to have, if this conversation can bring something, is everybody sit through all the credits and actually clap for it from today and in the future.
I mean, that would be an amazing thing. I mean, not necessarily like you don't have to really clap. I mean, clap if you feel like it, great. Sitting through the credits, of course, I have a vested interest too, because I belong to that industry. I see these people's work. There's always like there might be names that pop up on the screen who I know. But nonetheless, for me, the idea
of... Can you share the story also behind that?
Pardon me?
Can you share the story behind that as well, as to how it started?
Sitting through the credits.
Yeah.
Sitting through the credits, I mean, there's really not much of a story as much as it's just been something. I think sometime around once I started working in the film industry as an assistant and being on set and even off set, seeing the whole process, because it's not just on set, like even in prep, right from when you are working in a certain production house, there's like the spot boy or the attendant who makes lunch for you, and they take care of little things, like you can ask them for like unlimited chai, coffee. So it starts from like, seeing all these people around, and you also develop a relationship, because very often, like on commercials, it's probably much shorter, but on films, you have a relationship of almost like 4 or 5 months when you're working with these people. So I think very early on there was this sense of like acknowledging the work that every person does and how much it's a contribution to the picture that you see on screen. So once I felt that, I think it was pretty natural for me to be like, to sit through and watch the credits right up to the very end. I mean, it's also love. It's like, I mean, that thing on screen is like, I mean, the love for that is so much cinema that I would sit through like right up to the very end. But like what you were saying, I think the most important thing is to be able to really like acknowledge, because yes, I do understand about like whole. I mean, in India still we have more of a star-centric system as opposed to like in Hollywood, which is kind of more producer-centric. They've kind of moved away, like the 50s, 60s. I think even somewhere up to the early 90s was a very star-centric system. They've moved away from it. We are still in a very star-centric system. So, and it's very natural because you see people, they're glamorous. It's very nice to be like enamored by all of it. But there is literally like an army size, like a battalion of people who create that experience that you just enjoy sitting in that chair. So if people sit through, and I have noticed off late, I think fairly more number of people like like there are at least like a few people who sit through credit, and it's a nice thing, like it feels good that yes, we're acknowledging people. But thank you for raising that. I mean, that's a very nice observation as well.
There is also this question, like when I went to one of the classes that I went, there was a filmmaker in that, and he was saying that a lot of women become there are not many women in the industry, and even if they are, they're mostly into documentaries. There are not many people in the commercial cinema. Is that a thing? Is that like, as women, there are more moving towards the artsy part of it or the life part of it? Uh, how does that work? I mean, what are you inclined? Do you
Pardon me?
love do you love the commercial aspects of the cinema, or do you choose between commercial and documentary, or do you enjoy both?
So personally, for me, I think my heart is with narrative. Narrative is what we say like fiction. I mean, so commercial cinema is like, yeah, there's commercial and there's art, but all of that is fiction as opposed to non-fiction, which is documentary. When I started, I was doing fair amount of documentary, but like I kind of wanted to really move into telling stories, and that's where I have the most fun, and that's what I love the most. So that's, like I said, that's where my heart is. But having said that, there's a totally different joy. There's a lot of intense learning, and there's huge human experience in making shooting documentaries as well. So it's not something which I would just completely like abandon. I mean, I still would like documentary work and stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at. So your question about like women in the industry broadly, and like the fact that some people do tend to, I think there's been a fair amount of shift, not enough. So I would say maybe since the time I've been in the industry and what I have seen, there have been women who are like producers, for instance. Of course, have actresses. There have been a lot of people in like costume, hair, makeup, but in technical fields, for instance, in cinematography, in sound design, in music composition, in a lot of like for instance, in color correction and all of that. If I were to compare with women with the industry abroad and Hollywood, we have a lesser amount of women. But I've seen both worlds, and there is. I mean, it's not just about like women being in the industry, but like what you said, a lot of times it's about getting the opportunity. So basically, it's about the industry being able to support women and giving them the opportunity, giving them like for instance, there's been this huge thing in Hollywood, like other than the director of Wonder Woman, who was Patty Jenkins. there's not really been a major female film director who's been given like a tenfold film as like one of the Marvel movies. You don't get such a big budget for it. And there's really, and it's not for lack of talent. It's not for lack of ability. Likewise, a very similar thing happens. I mean, I've seen that here too. I mean, I should say like because of my interest in like the kind of like cinema I wanted to work on, I've been mentored by absolutely amazing cinematographers. I mean, on whose crews there was like, I mean, even when I was like the only female on the crew, there was really no lack of support in any which case. I actually went and grew up the rings around very fast, but that doesn't always happen. So, like what you heard, yes, so then what happens is a lot of women along the way drop out, some give up. And those who do, you have to find your own way, you have to find your own footing so then you take on the work that you're getting. But yes, I mean, change is happening. There are a lot more women coming up. And I think also have to acknowledge that there are a lot more men who are speaking about these issues and who are actually being as supportive as the people I have worked with. And who are willing to really like have more. I mean, and it's also like, I'm just going to like expand that bracket because it's not just the women, but there is also like, again, caste centric, support for like let's say Dalits. There is also support for like LGBTQ. So that whole bracket is where there has been a fair amount of like very subtle ostracization, complete lack of support. And it's something which always needs to be spoken about. It's something which we all feel like we have that. If we get an opportunity, where can I bring in someone who who is just as equally talented as another person, but who's not being given that opportunity by virtue of who they are. And so there is, broadly speaking, there is very subtle discrimination and there have been people who have been, I think even talent maybe was not come up because of that. That's an area that can change, and I'm sure it will.
Thank you for sharing about that because last year we had a boy staying with us called Brandon Richards. He came from New York. He's into theater, and me and my husband hosted him as for 7 months over here, and he became part of our family. And he is into theater. He wants to get into Broadway musical and stuff like that. And he would talk a lot about how there is no inclusion about certain race or certain color or a certain background, or if you are interested in a certain expression of art. And he would like get very sensitive about it. And so which is when I actually heard it for the first time, and that too from a person who is in the other side of the world, not and off late I feel like there is a globalized scenario happening where there is an interaction between industries happening as one world of cinema. It's moving towards that. I mean, at least that's my observation about things. What do you think about it?
No, definitely. I mean, that expansion I mean, it's been long overdue. So it's been happening. There is resistance also, as whenever change comes, you see that, right? I mean, there will be resistance within, and I mean that's part of the whole game. But I think awareness. I mean, primarily, I think it's been awareness, and there's been greater inclusivity that has been coming about. I mean, what's been very interesting, for instance, is like the film school I went to in LA. Strongly supported women. I mean, we had like actually of my department, which is across the borders, like strong support for women. I had many friends who were like from the LGBTQ community, and there was never this thing on campus. It was a very natural thing. Like it was just so very natural. So it was very interesting when you stepped out of film school and then you went out into the Hollywood thing, set up and worked, and then you saw that it wasn't exactly, as hunky-dory as it was in the closed world of a film school. So you saw that, even there, like change is still like coming about. So, and another thing also very interestingly, I'd like to point out is like what you were talking about as Brandon was talking, and it's even in our content. So the films that we make, for instance, and we see a lot of that, like representation. Like we've seen a change in the representation of female characters, but it's happening now. But like you also see a lot of cliched representation of female characters. I mean, when it comes to like communities and caste and like, I mean, they've always been either caricatured or like completely ignored. So that's also another thing about like it's not just about people who are working behind the scenes, but how, because I think what's more important and what's more powerful is how much you can speak about it on screen, and actually talk about these stories. I mean, it doesn't just have to be like, doesn't have to be what you call like social centric, like a social messaging. It's more about just sliding in the very little things. Like, I mean, we often say most of the characters in Bollywood are like Punjabi, they're like upper caste, those kind of like cliche norms which exist. So just changing those little things, placing them somewhere else, it's a different community, and then talking about like whatever your romance in your story. So all of it is happening. I mean, while it is, I mean, we could definitely do with a lot more, lot more.
A lot of that experimentation happens when they're doing biopics. Even as actors, when people choose to do biopics and stuff like that, there is a lot of elements of that going local that happens. And also, I remember this conversation. I don't remember who did the interview, but Sham Benegal was the one who was being interviewed. So he said, I stopped being arrogant or something about films, and I understood that I cannot just make films for myself. I'm just, these are not the exact words, but something along these lines, that when I watched him as a child, I saw that there's so much that it is not really understood by people. But I really, as a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old, I really enjoyed those films. And my mom, who's older, would say, "What do you see? I mean, here." And I would like, "Don't you see?" So for me, it was like, wow. At the same time, many years later, when I was much older, and he came up saying that I did a lot of films for myself. And it's only much later that I realized that there is an audience too, and I need to also cater to the audience. And I was like, really? So, where does the mark of an artist, as an artist, I'm talking because I feel like I'm an artist, I would like to express myself. At the same time, there is also this whole thing about it has to sell. Otherwise, you cannot continue your body of work. I mean, if you're like ready with a lot of commercially settled kind of a thing, yeah, you can continue doing your work. How does that balance out? Um, I don't even know if I'm asking a question which is coming out the way it
No,
has to.
absolutely. It's very, very relevant. It's kind of like having your feet in two boats, and
You don't lose yourself yet express.
exactly. Like, for instance, we always say this, there's always this huge debate, like if you get, people in the film industry started, where a lot of people like, we are not artists, we are artisans. We work for money. Like, we create art, but we work for money. There's a whole commercial aspect of it. And then there is always this thing about like balancing money off, trade, the whole trade-off of like money versus art, which it would be nice if you didn't have to. But nonetheless, it exists. So I think it's really a very personal thing. So there have been people that like across the spectrum, like people like Sham Benegal, who at some point in their career said, "I'm just going to make films for myself. It doesn't matter." It's like, and moving across to, I think somewhere every filmmaker does acknowledge that you're making art because you want to share it. You want to share it with an audience, right? And you want to reach out to at least a fair amount of people, if not as many people as like a commercial film would. So there is kind of like that entire trade-off, and I think somewhere you have to decide. And that's also what I think is the beauty of it, because there have been people, there have been filmmakers who have just been like filmmakers, like for instance, in today's day, I can quote in the Indian scenario, filmmakers like Auntie Mame, for instance, or, Govinder Singh, who just like who make films without sacrificing their sensibility, even if it be at the cost of working with smaller budgets, maybe having to cut down their stories, or so they buy that end of the bargain and say that my work is satisfied, and they end up creating something which is absolutely like I've never seen this before kind of stuff. So it's probably a little more niche. Fewer people see it. It just goes to festival. You have to search for it. Sometimes you don't even find it online. But nonetheless, if you do get to have that, enjoy that experience of watching it, it's something very unique and very good. And then there are people on the absolute other end of the spectrum, which is like commercial cinema. I'm going to try and reach out to as many people as possible, even if it means that I just follow formulas and I don't create experiment. So I think, the answer to your question, or for me personally, it has just been about like find your own happy medium, or sometimes you also make choices. Like for instance, I happened to work on a documentary. It was an experimental documentary, and we shot almost like some intermittently. I mean, funding was really hard and all of that. I think for almost like 3 years, and then we again shot a little bit last year. Yeah, not even last year, the year before that, in 2017. So it was quite a challenge. All of us took pay cuts on that. There's still like money to come. And that film is actually stuck in post because it needs funding. So it's not completed yet. But the whole premise of that documentary, I mean, it did even go to like a couple of doc labs for funding. So it takes a very long time for it to for it to come out. I mean, it's like its journey right now has been like a 5-year journey, and it's still not done. But nonetheless, the whole experience of working on it, and because it was experimental, being able to try out something different in the documentary genre, there was a different takeaway that I got. And I'm sure it's going to see light of being something. So sometimes what you do is, you choose stuff to do stuff like that, and then after that you go and shoot a commercial, and like that's your bread and butter, and you make money. So you kind of like, I guess you just have to like find your own way and say, this is what I'm going to do. This is not what I'm going to do. This is like, and sometimes it's absolutely like you just draw a line to say that that's it, like not beyond this. So I think that's the whole question of like that being the artist versus the artisan is always actually.
What are your key loves? Like I've heard you speak a lot about you want to write so that you can bring the Dakkani speaking into a film or something like that. We had a conversation where you are looking for authentic Dakkani.
Yes, that's kind of like work in progress right now. So again, see, that's something that started as a documentary, and this was when I was when I'd come to India. It's just election season, and it started as an idea. The idea was a documentary, and then it didn't really work out. It was too complex to really pull off as a documentary. But in the process, it turned into like somewhere down the road, it turned into an idea where I could turn that world into a narrative. And again, so this is something which is like, so Dakkani is again a language which we speak in Hyderabad. The Hyderabadi Boli is like that typical. I mean, what was really caricaturized, for instance, for a very long time in cinema, other than actually very few filmmakers like Shyam Benegal is one of them who's used it. So it, I thought I wanted to set this film, or rather setting it in the old city, or the world of like the old city. That's where they speak, and it's something which we've really not used much. So I mean, I would like to use it. I mean, I am not really hardcore again, because then what happens is you completely lose your audience out. Someone's still, debating on that. But nonetheless, yes, I would just want to use it as normal people speak, and not like you have, a comedian, you have like an Asrani coming in and like, dropping like punchlines in that and become like a part of the joke. So not like that, but just normalizing it. So, I mean, that's again something which, I feel very strongly about, like going back to whether it's women or all of the, discriminatory aspects that we've seen in cinema. And like how I feel like not just that you can make a biopic to kind of like normalize it, but rather just bring it into stories of normal people. Like this is how they speak. In Hyderabad, people speak in almost like 4 different dialects.
Anything that we use less is close to extinction. The more we use it, it is more sustainable.
Yes, I mean, also like for instance, with the case of Dakhini, what's very interesting is, I mean, Dakhini literature is kind of like almost become non-existent, because somewhere along the line there was a period when Dakhini literature was quite rich, and then we've never really used it, so it's kind of like, and even now when you look at like the way normal people speak, I mean, that Dakhini has like Bombaya Hindi mixed into it, and like all of it. So that's what it is. That is what is used now. So that's kind of how it is.
Is there anything you wish to talk about that I haven't asked a question about?
That depends. I mean, I can keep talking about cinema, so it's like, what do I wish to talk about cinema?
The future, maybe?
The future of cinema?
The future of how you see and how you dream that, oh, I wish this was there also, and that was there also, and and just by wishing it today and acknowledging it with 2 people having a conversation, it becomes true.
So yeah, it's interesting when this came up, because this is coming up because this is something which also came up from my film school interview, where I said this thing, and I still say this. I mean, one thing is future, I would like to see a lot of like change in the way in India we approach cinema, especially technically. So, I mean, we have great technicians, whether it's down south, whether in Bombay, but we really are never really like the pioneers of technology. So for me, going out film school in LA, but also like being in that film community and seeing the level of like, I mean, technical expertise that they bring, along with, of course, their creative ideas, was amazing, because it was kind of like, at times it would seem like the level of testing, for instance, level of planning and the diagram. This is like engineering, like hardcore engineering. And you need that kind, you need that level of expertise, and you need that level to be able to make, for instance, any of those like absolutely like big tent, the tentpole movies like the Marvel superhero movies that was like big time action films. And that's how we make them, and it would be absolutely fantastic to be able to like, for India to get onto that same plane, because it's not the lack of talent. In fact, I always say this, that some of our light boys like super intelligent. Like if only they had the right training, I mean, things they would be able to achieve. I think it's been broadly like a cultural mindset of not having that innovative spirit. I mean, again, it's something which can change, but I would love to see that. I would love to see like innovations in cinema, rather than we always just get technology from outside. We have actually, like, even technicians, artists, we pioneered very little stuff. We've gotten more stuff. And back in the day, I mean, I'm talking of like a Satyajit Ray movie. His DP was one of the first people in the world to use bounce lighting. And we did that because bounce lighting is a technique of lighting. And they did that because they were short on resources. So, that kind of creative ingenuity would be lovely to see, across the board in, in the film industry south here. Another thing also is, and I would say this not just in cinema, across everything that we do, is more value for human work and effort. So somewhere there, I think we Indians have this tendency to be like a little bit of skillful and cheapskates. There's not enough value given to human labor, and I see this across the board in our industry where there's not enough safety. Unions don't really take care of like the people who work for them, for instance, and all of that stuff, like the organized industry. When I compare that to the West and how fairly secure they are, working hours, for instance, like there are days when we work like 18 hours on the trot, and people fall ill, and then they can't earn their livelihood and stuff. So I would like to see a lot of social change as well in terms of like how we approach things. And because we're talking about it, there's one really, really bad thing that happens in Bollywood, which is there's a segregation of like how we eat food. Okay, so what happens is when lunch is served, they call it A crew catering and B crew catering. And B crew catering is generally what is considered to be like the lower round, people who are doing like physical labor and drivers and all of that. And A crew catering is mostly the educated people or the assistants and the health departments. So I think that's very discriminatory. And it's also discriminatory because they don't get the same kind of food. So A crew might get pasta and kebabs, which people want. So, and then there have been many, many conversations with producers about this, people giving all kinds of reasons, and for some reason it's never changed. So this is again like one of those inherently deeply discriminatory, policy, like procedures that's followed in Bollywood, which very few people actually talk about. It's just become our norm and the way of working. So there's a lot of change that can come about, and you say, yeah, the future, I would love to see an industry where we'll always be producing creative stuff. I think our creative stuff is going to get better and better and better as we get more exposed to international cinema and all of that.
Do you also think, like when we talk about the food, like the people who help me at home, like they would not have tasted continental or Chinese before. It is very Indianized Chinese or Indianized version of it. Because when I work at home and I cook different things, they're like, oh, we never had it, so can we try it? So there is also a gap about, okay, I eat a little, but I'm not very satisfied as a meal because I'm used to eating this. Do you think that is also the reason why there is two different sections, or is it what you are talking about as disparate?
See, I think it's started as a practice for whatever reasons, and I mean, it's given as a reason very often. Okay, that yeah, they're not going to eat, for instance, continental food, But the whole line of argument, for instance, has been like, let everybody just eat together. So, what happens when, for instance, Hollywood is food set and everyone just comes and picks whatever they want. So the whole idea is all the food is laid out and you still sit together. Here, the sections are segregated. Okay, so they have a separate area because there have been many times when I've gone and eaten with them. We've done this. So, it's kind of like I've seen how that food is, I've seen how this food is. The sections are segregated. And what you're talking about, for instance, so when I was like a camera assistant with this, the cinematographer I was working with in Andhra region, he had this habit of sometimes he would just like treat his own food. So there would be like coffee ordered from Coffee Deal, let's say, for and there would be like these electrics and all of them. We probably never really tasted like a cappuccino and espresso. But you order, they're like more than happy to taste. I mean, they'll be like, like a face, like acha hai, and like, theek hai, madam. might not really relish it. But the whole idea is it's not about the food per se, but how you're treating them.
About how inclusion. We're talking about
Exactly. Like,
inclusion.
so this man would not say, oh, he's not going to drink this. He's like, okay, fine, you want regular coffee? I'll get you regular coffee. Just buy coffee for everyone on the team. You know? So it's about how you're going to include them. And the thing is, see, the class system exists in India, right? So
Stratification is existential. Yeah. We were saying about the stratification.
right. So I don't know at what point.
We were talking about the stratification of the class system of India and how it still exists.
Yes. So like broadly, what I was talking about is how, for instance, I've seen people being. I mean, the whole idea of segregation is like you eat differently in a different place, different kind of food, and the other person eats different. And I should point out that it doesn't happen in the South industry. So this is something which Bollywood censor. And so the whole idea of segregation, I think it comes with also how we treat our house helpers broadly, and that's how like you grow up learning to treat them. So it's kind of like, oh, they're not like exactly like what you mentioned. They're not going to eat this kind of stuff. You sit down, you sit separately and eat. So I think that kind of like flowed into the film industry at some time, and it's not really changed at any point. I mean, it's been like I think in the brief maybe 2 years or something. I don't know if there are like producers coming in to change stuff, but the last time it's again been this that status quo has been maintained of class segregation. And like I was saying in that example of the PPI assistant, when he would order coffee for the team, like the team of his people he was working with, and coffee came from Coffee Day, it would not be like coffee for some, like the light boys came from a tuffy. Just order for everyone. Yeah, they might not really like a cappuccino, get a regular coffee. So it's not about the food. It's just about treating everybody equally on set. And treating each person, irrespective of the job level designation or whatever, the pay that they're earning. So that would,
We're talking
that's
about
again something that
inclusion
is
here.
going to change.
We're talking about inclusion here.
Absolutely. Inclusion, yeah, inclusion in terms of like class inclusion.
Yeah.
Earlier we were talking about inclusion across, yes, like gender and sexuality, and this is and class. So, yeah,
And allowance for everybody. Thank you so much for being in conversation with me. And
Thank
I'm
you.
hoping to see a lot more people choosing diverse careers into all the careers that are possible when the names start rolling, whether it is cinematography, whether it is art direction, whether it is DP, or whether it is all those technical terms that they use, or even anything at all. I wish a lot more people start choosing careers which are like, and they become mainstream. It's like everyday business, and there is not much a child will struggle and say, oh, I'd like to do this, and that becomes a struggle. So I'm coming to that space where I hope in the future that we have a lot of careers available, like a big shopping mart, and an awareness about it.
Thank you so much actually for having me. And like, yeah, it was a fun conversation. Talk about cinema. I mean, usually it's always like you talk about cinema with people within your fraternity, right? And otherwise, people outside are like, oh, tell me about this actor, actress who was on set with. But it's not really about the world of cinema. So, right? Yeah, it was lots of fun talking about the world of cinema. I know you're like a big time movie buff.
Yeah, I can like watch 10 films in a day if they were that many hours.
I know you've done like 3 films and 4 films.
Different languages and different genres, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can keep rattling about cinema all day because I think it's such a magical world. It's like, you know, a dream world, right? That you can just get transported to, and very few like art forms can actually do that. Like, you know, in your waking state, you're actually like, you know, transported into a totally different world. So it's absolutely like magical. It's an amazing art form.
There's also this whole thing about like when you read a book, it's like this, but when they make a movie, it's like this. But I feel like a book is a book and a movie is a movie. Sometimes it's interpreted well in a book, sometimes it's interpreted well in a movie, and you have to just look at them independently, even though you read a book or even though you watched a film. I mean, look at Sound of Music.
Actually, you know what? So when I was younger, before before I really got into cinema, I was one of those snobs, you know. And I think a lot of times what happens is when you read a book, you've created the world in your head. So after that, when you watch a movie, you're trying to compare the world in your head with somebody else's imagination. You're like, oh, it's not like this. But I mean, what you say is so true. It's like a book is an experience, which is its own unique experience, and you know, a movie is its own unique experience. So just go for it. You know, without. In fact, there's another thing that I do. Like a lot of directors, like you know, whose work I admire. I don't even watch trailers. I don't read about like anything about the movie in terms of like the story and stuff. Like I try and go in like blind, absolutely blind. Like I feel like no, don't tell me anything. I want to go in blind and then experience what this is about. And it's a totally different experience then, you know. It's like you're encountering a world that you know nothing about, and then you know get into it, and it's a journey with the characters. It's very fascinating. So it's like,
You know, there are a lot of people who go into a film, like let's say it's 1.5 hour, 2 hour film, and say, oh no, I didn't understand much, and they go out. Like in a class, when you didn't understand a math problem or a science subject, you go back and ask a question, right? What would it take for a person to say, oh, I didn't understand this film, so why don't I go back into the theater and watch it again? Because every time you watch a film, you're watching it differently. Like I can watch a film back to back and realize, oh, how did I miss this in the first time? Oh, how did I miss this even after the second time? There is so much more that you understand. It's like if one can actually enjoy a film and really get to the, you know, okay, yeah, you go for entertainment, that's true, but at the same time, if you really don't get a film, I think instead of saying I didn't understand it, it's not good. I wish people go watch it again and again and again until they really get it. You know, because the person who made it is not a stupid. I mean, he's not an idiot who he or she's not a stupid for making that conversation. It may not be something in your universe yet. What would it take to actually go and say, oh, what is this about? What am I not getting here? You know?
it's like how there are different kinds of films, there are different kinds of viewers. So you're one of those viewers who kind of like, you know, you start seeing cinema too, you know, and there's like what we call the art of seeing. There's also something else. It's the art of observation. So when you observe the world, you create a world, and then there are viewers who go and who start seeing the layers. And then there are viewers who are just like, I don't want to think, I just want to go in, I want to come out, and like, you know, I just want those like 2 hours of like being in some kind of a world and come back. So, you know, it's again different kinds of worlds, and like, yeah, there's different kinds of films to really cater to all of them.
I would like to actually close this conversation with Auntie Mame as a quote. In the movie Auntie Mame, she says, "The world is a buffet of everything, but everybody is starving." You know, life is a
Yeah, that's a
buffet of
beautiful
something, and
quote,
everybody
isn't
is
it?
starving. So I wish everybody eats their full and be nourished and
Why would you starve yourself?
yo
Enjoy the movie. So on that
for the
note,
films.
thank you. Thank you so much.